Hello, everybody. Welcome to Exploring Environmental and Natural Resources. I'm Mr. Davenport, and today we are discussing how we look at the difference between point versus non point water pollution. So, we have talked about water quality and air pollution. Today, our focus is on understanding the source or sources of water pollution. Now, first of all, let's get something cleared out of the way. What is a source? A source is essentially where a contaminant comes from, its origination point. And so when we're looking at the difference between point source water pollution and non-point source water pollution, we are simply trying to figure out where this pollution comes from. All right, so let's do a little thought experiment. All right, so we have 7 cups, okay, A through G. And in these 7 cups, there are some that are clearly contaminated. Well, here's the thing. 6 out of these 7 have a contaminant, have a legitimate contamination to it. Okay? So, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to zoom the screen in a little bit more, and Mr. Davenport is going to disappear. And I'm going to give you guys about 30 seconds. And in those 30 seconds, I want you to try to identify, look closely at A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And I want you to write down at least 4 that you absolutely are certain have contamination of some kind. Okay? I want you to write down which ones you believe have some kind of contamination. Now remember, 6 out of the 7 are contaminated here. They have some kind of chemical contaminant. So, I am going to mute the microphone and give you guys 30 seconds starting now. We are back. So, could you identify these contaminated cups? Well, let's go through in alphabetical order and see if you guys got the contamination correct. So, all right. So, clearly, A had some form of contamination. You may not have known what it was, but it obviously had this brownish orangish contamination. That was the chemical iodine. Okay, it mixes with water fairly well, but over time it kind of settles into the bottom. But if you didn't have this whole clear thing here, you wouldn't have seen this big old dollop of iodine at the bottom, and you could have easily made the mistake of saying this might be drinkable water. Now, this is filled with multi-purpose cleaner, okay? It's about a cap full, less than 3 milliliters of multi-purpose cleaner added to water. Now, you can tell that there's some contamination because it's got this nice frothy bubble at the top. But if we had taken that away and it had just been the picture of the clear cup, would you have known that had some kind of contamination? Would you have been able to identify it? What about C? Did y'all see and pay attention to this thin strip of oil right here? Did you see it? Or did you not pay attention to it? Give me a second. There we go. Now, this is another one that could have easily been identified as clean. Look at the bottom. We've got a collection of dish soap, and because of its density, it sunk to the bottom, and the rest of the water was clear, but there was a contaminant there. Now, if you were here and in class, you might have been able to smell and identify. Give me a second, y'all. You would have been able to smell and identify that there was some kind of scent in the mixture, but you may not have been able to visibly see the contaminant. E. This has a small amount of Roundup and salt. And guys, this is where pollution, especially water pollution, gets scary. Because to the untrained eye, if we didn't know that the chemical was in there, this could have easily been identified as clean water. Same thing with our next, okay? If you guys were here and were able to investigate clearly, you would have seen a thin layer that had a slick coating, and that would have been the rubbing alcohol. You might have identified that the water and rubbing alcohol were mixed together. You would have been able to smell that there was something there, but just by the naked eye, you wouldn't have been able to tell. And that leaves G. G is the plain water with no contamination. So why did Mr. Davenport do this? Why did Mr. Davenport go through all of this to show all of these different types of contaminants and the impact on water and looks and smells and all of that whole deal? Well, guys, it comes down to being able to identify the source of pollution or not being able to identify the source of pollution. See, there are things that we can easily identify as pollutants. There are things that we can easily tell that there's a direct impact on water quality by these pollutants. But then there are things that we can't tell and we don't know where they come from. And so that is what brings us to point versus non-point pollution sources. So first, let's define water pollution. So water pollution is the addition of harmful chemicals or substances to water. So any harmful chemical, any harmful substance, that is water pollution. All right. And there are two main types of water pollution: point source water pollution and non-point source water pollution. So let's dig deeper into point source water pollution. Point source water pollution occurs when the contaminant comes from an obvious source. We know where the pollution came from. Point source contaminants come from industrial, commercial, residential, and agricultural sources. Often they are waste products that are a byproducts of the daily operations of those industries in industrial, commercial, or residential areas. So some examples of point source pollution include a tanker oil spill in water, animal waste treatment lagoon spills when there are those accidents, or wastewater treatment facility spills. So we're going to do another little show and tell. I'm going to show you guys some pictures and we're going to identify the point source pollution, where the source of the pollution is. So, I've got 4 pictures here. We've got a feedlot, we've got this boat on the ocean, we've got this factory, and then we have this factory with a pipe. Let's zoom and take a deeper look at these. So, we have a feedlot, and we've got water that is running off from this feedlot. And so, what is the source of the contamination? The source of the contamination are the livestock, okay? It is the animals. Now, agriculture does cause a certain amount of pollution. We try to mitigate it. We try to keep it by collecting a lot of this waste in one place and getting rid of it. But we can't do that all the time. Sometimes we get heavy rains that wash pollutants away like this before we're able to collect and clean things up the way that we would want them to. So we as agriculturalists have to be very aware that sometimes we are part of the problem and try to do things to improve water quality, like cleaning up in a timely and efficient manner. Now, where is the water pollution coming from? This is an oil spill. You see where the water has turned from nice and bright blue to this nauseating neon green. This is because our wonderful oil tanker has sprung a leak. This happens not regularly, but it's way too often. Mistakes happen and oil tankers get damaged, and this causes leaks into the ocean. These tankers are carrying millions of gallons of oil, and this causes massive loss of life with fish and other aquatic species. Even worse, it damages beaches when this oil, which starts to kind of sink to the bottom, gets mixed in. It starts to separate. Part of it stays to the float, some floats to the top, and some of the heavier stuff sinks to the bottom, the more dense stuff, and it causes these nasty collection of dead animals and algae and other things that grow in the ocean called tar balls. They wash up on the water, and it's just bad. So this is all caused by one little accident. And then we have this, okay? This is runoff, okay? We are clearly seeing that something is streaming off from this area. So where's it coming from? It's coming from that factory. This is byproduct runoff. It is being basically washed out of whatever kind of factory this is, and then basically put into a river or a stream to get rid of it. Now, not all of this stuff is going to be highly and completely toxic, but mistakes can happen, and extra amounts of this waste can wind up in our water supply, can wind up damaging the water quality for plants and animals. And then here we have, where is the pollution coming from? Well, it's coming from that pipe, which is connected to that factory. So let's talk about these examples. So this is coming from livestock and the runoff from livestock production, the dirt, the manure, the urea, the excess feed, okay? This is coming from a damaged oil tanker. And this is coming from factory runoff, and this is coming from factory waste. So this gives us a whole issue of dealing with this. All of these pictures are showing point source pollution because the pollutant is coming from an obvious identifiable source. But what if we don't know where the pollutant is coming from? What do you think we call a pollutant that comes from a source that's not easily identifiable? Like, I mean, where is the pollution here? Honestly, where is it? I don't know. Where is it? Can we see it? I mean, we see puddles, we see stuff that's there. So that's right, guys. Pollutants that come from a source that is not easily identifiable or come from multiple sources is called non-point source pollution. Non-point source pollution often is basically, like we said, it is when the contaminant comes from a source that is not easily identifiable, or it comes from multiple places, multiple sources. Non-point pollution often originates as rain, snow, precipitation, and it collects contaminants as it travels across the ground until it becomes saturated, until it becomes polluted. Non-point source pollution is found over a large area, and it's hard to pinpoint the exact origination of the contamination. Examples of non-point pollution include agricultural and urban runoff, from fertilizers to sediment to pesticides. Runoff from parking lots, grease, gasoline, oil from oil leaks, salt from contamination, and road de-icing. So let's take another look at our picture here. So where are some of these sources of non-point source pollution? Well, we've got our snow. Our snow is starting to melt. It's collecting oils and greases and sediment and chemicals, and it's got salt from where it was de-iced. So that's melting, and that's causing all of this stuff to pollute. But it's not just coming from one place. We also have things melting and draining down those drain pipes, which is giving more mixture and contaminants to this puddle that's coming together. And then trash cans leak. They often leak liquid materials from things that are decomposing. And so all of these, even though we can kind of look at all of these sources and say, this is a cause, 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 when it all comes together, because there's not one major source that can be agreed upon, it is non-point source pollution. It's coming from everywhere. Therefore, everybody is responsible for it. So, as you can see, it's often hard to tell exactly where a pollutant is coming from in non-point source pollution. Other examples of situations that may cause non-point source pollution, just want to remind, are agricultural or urban runoff from fertilizers, or extra sediment into our waterways, or even salt runoff from roads that are being de-iced. So, guys, what I wanted to end you with is basically some short images of cups A through G. Okay? We identified these different contaminants as iodine, multi-purpose cleaner, oil, dish soap, fertilizer, salt, alcohol, and then, of course, none. We've also identified things that could be things that easily identifiable. The iodine is a point source pollutant because we can easily identify it. We know where it's going to come from. The multi-purpose cleaner, we can easily identify it. We know what is causing that pollution. The oil, however, can be point or non-point source pollution depending on the situation. If it's runoff from a parking lot, it's non-point source pollution. If it's an oil tanker that's leaking in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, then it's obvious that that's the cause of the oil. Dish soap. We all use dish soap. This is a contaminant that can show up anywhere. Fertilizers, Roundup, pesticides, salt. This is non-point because it comes from everywhere. It's everyone's responsibility. And so, guys, what I want you to keep in mind as we are continuing to look at pollution is that it's easy to point the fingers and say that it is factories and agriculture and industry's fault for all this contamination. But the truth of it is, it's not true. Everybody is responsible in their own way for non-point source pollution. And so making it a point to understand that we all impact our world in a negative way somehow through pollution, through contaminants, is the first step in understanding how we can impact our environment through our own actions. All right, guys, that is going to end our lesson for today. I want us be on the lookout for assignments for the rest of the week, and I will see you next time.